But before that, we have one public comment. Let me ask Nina Howman to make a statement, and then we can start with the briefing.
Good morning. I'm here on behalf of Los Angeles Neighborhood Housing Services, Laura Ye. I'm happy to announce that LANHS, with its consortium, received funding for the NSP2 round, and we're happy to say that we're going to work in partnership with the Housing Department and New Economics and other municipalities around in the region and spend the money, and we're just pleased to be here to announce that. We can also invite everybody to the foreclosure counseling fair tomorrow at Casted Northridge. We have 8 servicers present and to have families to work on their loan modifications, and we invite you all to attend.
Nina, you have those almost monthly now?
We have them monthly every first Saturday of the month, except for July and September. They'll be on the second Saturday, and they'll be throughout the region, LA County, but we have several of them in the city of Los Angeles.
Okay. Could you give the public your phone number and address?
Yes. It's 213-381-2862, and the address is 3926 Wilshire Boulevard. We're on the second floor, and every Tuesday and Thursday night we have clinics. Families can walk in and get help one-on-one directly right then and there. So.
And one other thing, your website.
www.lanhs.org.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilman.
You should keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Okay, we can start on the briefing. The record reflect Mr. Alican has joined us.
Good morning. I'm Jim Clark, Director of Federal Relations in the Mayor's Office, and I'm joined by Bill Kreitz in the CAO's office. Last week, I was able to announce that the California had received funding for the high-speed rail, and this week I was hoping to be able to announce that the Tiger grants were going to be awarded. This is the $1.5 billion discretionary by the Secretary of Transportation, of which we have $81 million of projects. Unfortunately, that decision is not being made today, but it will be made before February 17th. February 17th is the one-year anniversary of the passage of ARA. And in going back and looking at the initial legislation, I wanted to point out, because there's been a lot of discussion about jobs. Jobs is one of just 5 items that was one of the goals of ARA. There was other goals pertaining to technology, environmental improvement and enhancement, tax credits, and other kinds of reductions, individual assistance, and all of those things. I think when unemployment hit 10% is when we suddenly got this focus in making jobs the premier, which it should be now. But part of the problem is that the original grants that were put out, some of the grants, were not really job inducive. In fact, today, you're going to be asked to accept a grant application from ITA for broadband. This is $7.5 million, and it will only create 1 full-time employee position and 1 consultant position, because most of the money is going to purchase software and purchase equipment, because that's how the grant was structured. Again, there was a discussion last week, a very spirited discussion about jobs and jobs and how much it's costing to create jobs and how many jobs we're creating here versus a place like New York City. I believe the CEO has prepared a memo and distributed it, which I think adequately explains that. And the bottom line was, based upon what we've expended and the number of jobs that we've created, that our costs are very comparable to both New York City and San Francisco. Interesting, I have some material that I wanted to share with you, one of which is an article from the New York Times that New York City, that had received $5.5 billion worth of stimulus funding, is facing closing 20 fire stations because they don't have the money to be able to do that. So the situation that Los Angeles faces with our budget is not much dissimilar from what other large cities, all cities across the United States are facing this, because ARA did not provide money for budget stabilization. As I said before, it provided money for new programs or expanding existing programs, and not to be able to backfill on budget shortfalls.
Mr. Clark, let me ask, did the ARA have any grants for fire as they did for police?
Previously, there was not going to be, but what they did is, and you just considered one called SAFER, which previously we had not been eligible for, but they changed that and made it an ARA grant, and we were able to apply for that. So we hope that there will be some relief for that.
Is that for attrition?
It's for attrition. It's a little looser in what it defines as the cutoff for attrition, but I think we'll be able to qualify for that, as well as for equipment. It's both for personnel and equipment.
Okay, thank you.
We can get you there.
Okay. And when you say equipment, is that across the board, vehicles and such?
No, I don't believe it's vehicles. No, sir.
Because one of the things we just last week had to take about $18 million worth of fire vehicles and equipment out of Nicola because we couldn't afford the debt service. So that would be hopefully, if it's eligible, an ideal grouping, because it's already been vetted. It meets, meets their criteria as far as length of time and everything else, but again, it depends on what's in the equipment package.
We'll keep an eye out for anything that's coming down the line where we could go after some money for that. There was also a second part of the discussion last week about the issue of just having enough staff to be able to do the oversight and all of the reporting requirements that are on there. We're still waiting for the CAO's memo to come to you on this issue of applying the administrative fee so that we can be able to secure these positions in the CAO's office and the Controller's office. I hope that is forthcoming. But also, I'm providing to you a copy of a letter that was sent from our Environmental Affairs Department. It's part of a similar letter that New York City and Seattle sent to the federal government, where the U.S. Department of Energy had a proposal to increase the reporting requirements under energy efficiency block grants, the state energy program, and the weatherization programs to go from quarterly reports to monthly reports. So we continue to have this ongoing need for more and more accountability, and yet less and less staff to deal with it. But like I said, this is something that cities across the country are dealing with. Lastly, I wanted to mention that you had received, along with the mayor and the city attorney, a letter from the city controller regarding the use of force account or city workforce on street projects, and some concerns that were raised in that letter. All of those concerns have, in fact, been resolved with the Federal Highway Administration. We will have to, in the future, contract out work. We will not be able to use city workforce, but on the projects that we are currently have underway, we will be able to continue to do that. And the last thing I wanted to leave with you, and I don't know if this had been shared with you before, but there's a list of all of the street resurfacing projects that are being done under ARA, and it's broken down by council district. So if the members are interested in knowing what streets are being resurfaced in their districts, that information is available.
Now, do we have copies for each council office for today's meeting?
I'll get additional copies as well, too, for that.
With regard to this list, is there a listing of dollar amounts and mileage?
I can get that for you.
Yeah, because I noticed that there's very few in CD7 and a lot more in wealthier areas. Okay.
What they did, they broke it down into 4 general areas that are listed at the top, and each area received about $10 million in ARA funds is being spent on street resurfacing.
So 15 council districts got $10 million each?
No, sir. There was $10 million for each of these 4 areas: the East Valley, North Central, West Valley, and Bay Harbor. But I can give you
by council district
a breakdown. I can get you a breakdown of that.
Yeah, as I said, it appears that the wealthier council districts have more.
Okay.
Let me ask one other thing. In looking at this, is the issue when we say resurfacing, we're not talking slurry. We're talking about reconstruction of the streets.
Not slurry, but resurfacing.
I just want to find out, make sure that we're talking.
Resurfacing versus reconstruction.
Well, I mean, but if it's slurry,
Slurry is just...
I know, but that's what I want to make sure
top
this
coat.
isn't slurry.
Councilman, let me do this,
Yeah.
since I'm not an engineer.
Yeah, that's what I want to make
Let me get a report back to you on what's being done, and then for Mr. Alacon,
This
too,
would
the
be
dollar.
resurfacing.
Yes.
It says resurfacing,
Resurfacing.
which is just the top, but not just the slurry seal.
Yeah, but we want to verify that.
Okay, I'll get that information to you. That concludes my report.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask a couple of questions with regard to the job creation piece? I had asked for an assessment of the dollars expended per job creation, and New York appeared to be at about $200,000 per job creation, and we looked like we were somewhere between $700,000 and $800,000 per job creation. And I noticed the application on the agenda today is asking for
7.5 million.
7.5 million,
For one job.
and it creates one job.
Right.
And there's nothing in the grant application or the RFP, I should say, that prohibits creating jobs, and yet there's only one job created.
Well, but the purpose of this specific grant, and when the ITA comes up to talk about it, is primarily the purchase of equipment and software, and,
Is there anything to prohibit job creation?
well, there could be, sure, because the purpose of it was
You said
for-
the primary purpose, and I understand from ITA that no, it wasn't prohibited. And in fact, you created one job. Why couldn't you create 100?
I'll let ITA in there.
But I'm asking you because you direct the program, and it's a question of emphasis and focus. And I keep saying that job creation should be the primary purpose here, and job retention.
Yes, sir, and I respond with the fact that some of these grants are not job-creating grants.
There's nothing in here to stop somebody from being an outreach coordinator at the library where the new computer system is. The whole purpose of this grant is to give access to computer technology to communities that were otherwise disenfranchised from the network. And how are you going to get them into the libraries to see this if you don't hire a body to go out and tell them?
But that's not covered under the grant.
I believe it is. I don't think it's prohibited. There's nothing. We have the matching portion, $2.8 million of city staff to do just that. We could have created jobs with the other portion. So yes, it is eligible, and I beg to differ. Show me in this application where it says you can't ask for more jobs.
I'll bring the application to you, sir.
Please, because this is just wrong. This is just, we'd rather buy equipment than create jobs.
Again, sir, though, I'd like to correct the statement that you made about the fact that when we did this analysis between New York City and ourselves, the cost, about the amount of money that we've expended versus the number of jobs that we've created, New York City is expending about $89,000 for every job that they've created, and we've expended $91,000 for every job that we've created, and it's about comparable to San
Wait a minute.
Francisco.
How do you do that math?
You do it based on, this is the amount of money that you've spent, and these are the number of jobs that you've created. It's not based on the award, because we don't have that money in hand. We can't create jobs when we don't have the money in hand. We create jobs when we expend the money. We've expended the money at the same rate that New York City has for every job that we create, and the same with San Francisco. It's a difference of $2,000 per job.
So, but they're claiming 27,000 jobs, and we're claiming 380. I don't get it.
Well, sir, we can go into the CAO's memo, but I think that's explained in detail about that. 15,000 of those jobs are teacher jobs that were able to be retained because they
We need
received...
to retain jobs. The mayor just called for a layoff.
But those are teacher jobs that the school district receives. So if you'd like to have the school
What
district...
difference does it make?
Well, it makes a difference because you're saying that we're responsible. We're not responsible for retaining teacher jobs. The
Well, we
school
are
district
responsible
is.
for retaining cops and firefighters and librarians and
That's right.
street
And New York-
surfacing guys.
And New York City is closing 20 fire stations because they don't have enough money to pay their firefighters.
Well,
So-
can you imagine if they didn't get the hour money?
But they're
It
not
would be
able
more.
to, they're not able to use the ARA money for that.
So then why do you use that as an example?
To make the example that all cities are facing this problem, that they receive ARA funds, but they're not able to use those ARA funds to backfill their budget problems, and they're having to face laying off people, just like we are.
You just said that the New York used the money to retain teachers.
Correct.
That's backfilling.
Right.
Which side of your mouth am I listening to here? The portion that says we can retain or the portion that says we can't?
Well, we don't have the teachers. The school district does. So the school district used their money to retain their teachers.
We can't retain librarians?
No. There's no funds for that. There were funds for teachers. And then the other part of it, the state passed through the Medicaid relief money so that they could shift 5% of their funding over, and they retained 10,000 hospital workers.
So you're telling me that in
So out of the
this grant today, that is being considered today, we could not apply for more than one new job creation?
I'm not saying that. But I don't know.
Can you
that
expound on it to give me an idea of what they could have asked for? Because I'm trying to focus on job creation, and you keep fighting me on this point. I asked in this application, why was there only one job created in a pool of millions of dollars?
Let me just ask, I think you may have to have a meeting with Ms. Alarcon and explain.
I already met with them. I want to have a meeting in public.
Because what I understood in the proposal is the bulk of the money was to buy the 2,800 computers.
Yes.
And the cities...
Now, that creates jobs, but we don't get the credit for those jobs.
No,
I'm sure
but-
somebody's making those computers, and hopefully they're being made in the United
The purpose of the grant,
States.
Mr. Chair, is to address the digital divide,
Yeah, but
to bring communities into the digital world. How do you do that without getting a person to sell it to the community?
Well, I think the issue is that what I understood about it, this grant is to buy equipment. Our matching funds and such from the library and such as to get those computers installed. Then it's my understanding that the people that work in the libraries and the rec centers and those worksource centers are going to be responsible for the uses of the equipment and attracting people into their
Correct.
facilities.
We could have used those jobs. We could have used this application to create positions, to do outreach functions, so that we don't have to lay off those librarians.
Well-
Now, wouldn't it be ironic if we get this grant, and then we have to lay off the librarians who are supposed to do the outreach?
Well, my understanding is that in reading it, is I don't think there was money for for positions that...
Yes, there was.
Well,
Yes, there was. That is patently untrue. There
well,
was
I
money
didn't see
for...
that.
You had the ability. It wasn't the primary focus, I grant you that. The primary focus was the computers. But there's nobody who knows anything about the digital divide who will tell you that you can't use human beings in that process. The administration understands the digital divide.
I know, but I think the issue, what we're saying is that where these computers are going, there's staff on those locations that will...
Who are being threatened with layoffs. That's
Well,
exactly my point.
But I'm saying the issue is that those locations are the ones that are going to be, just as they are now, attracting people into their facilities from libraries, rec centers, and things of that nature. So that's what I understood. But if there's a need for more clarity, I think we've asked you to bring that back.
Sure. Yes, sir, and I think maybe the department, when they come up and make their presentation, can...
Let me just say that if we can get... Are you finished your...
Yes, sir, I am.
All right.
Mr.
From the
Parks,
CA,
yes.
do we have any...
Bill Cright to the CAO's office, sorry.
Okay.
In the interest of time, I'll be very brief. We don't have any applications that were submitted to the federal government for funding since the last ad hoc committee. I just briefly will say that we have, since the beginning of the ARA project, we have now submitted 148 applications for almost $1.5 billion. Obviously, we've not been funded for all of those, but we do have 81 grant awards for almost $600 million, $591 million, and we don't expect a grant application to be submitted for the following week between now and the next ad hoc committee. And that would conclude my presentation.
And would you give the public your website so that you can keep track of your dashboard
Yes.
and all that?
Thank you. Mr. Garcetti always reminds me of that, so thank you.
He just called me.
Yeah. I should know by now. It's recovery.lacity.org.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
my tardiness. I will blame it on the rain. But I just came in and I wanted to ask a question. Was Mr. Alarcon being friendly again today?
Yes, he's going to call you Frank.
I just wanted to... No, you've been friendly for about 4 days.
I'm on a roll.
Yeah, we're going to check his diet.
When the fight begins, you got to fight back.
Okay. So you've covered the president. We can now bring number 1.
Yes, sir.
And
Thank
the
you.
staff for that. We have staff from CAO and ITA? Yeah, okay.
Good morning, council members. I'm Jacob Wexler with the Office of the City Administrative Officer. As you have already discussed, item number 2 is a grant from the U.S. Department of Commerce for $7.5 million for the purchase primarily of equipment, replacing approximately 2,600 new and replacement workstations for the libraries, CDD, and rec parks facilities. CEO recommends approval of, recommends that the council authorize ITA to accept the grant. There's a city match for approximately $2.8 million, also as was discussed for staffing.
And that's in kind.
That's in kind. It's for staff that already exists. It's not additional cost. The only potential additional match or requirement would be that the equipment, after the warranty period's expired, there would be a need for the city to maintain that, or the city can make that decision to maintain that. There's already funds budgeted for rec and parks, for library to pay for that maintenance for the current equipment, so that should be continued. The CDD facilities are going to be maintained by the agencies that are supporting those facilities.
Is the library money only for the library equipment, or is it for the citywide?
The library money would be adequate. The current budget that has library equipment maintenance funds can be used for the library equipment. The CDD equipment will be maintained by the agencies that are running those centers. Rec and parks, because there's a lot of new equipment, there isn't a current budget allocation to support that equipment, so at the end of 3 years we'll have to find a way to either maintain it or pick up that cost or find some way to keep those things running in the absence of maintenance.
Let me ask you also, earlier this week, I think at one of our budget hearings, it was discussed that possibly this grant may be in jeopardy. Has that been resolved?
I know that there's a contingency requirement that the city, in relation to a single audit finding of material weakness in the city's financial statements, the grantor picked up on that and said that we need to report back to them, I think, by the end of March. I think I can update whether or not that reporting has been done, but it was related to SMS and FMS and the reconciliation between the two systems, and the city, since that single finding audit, has made efforts to address upgraded SMS or working on FMS, so hopefully those efforts will show that we're working towards that. I don't know if I can.
What is that, an administrative issue as opposed to a financial issue?
It's probably, it would be described as a systems issue. The issue is the reconciliation between the data in the supply management system and the data in the financial management system. And there's, I guess, there is a lot, in single audit fund, I think there was a lack of confidence that we would be able to accurately reconcile that information with each other. So we've been working on that. And we need to report back by March 31st. I don't know if you have additional information on that one.
Yeah. If we have the ITA, could you, if you heard the earlier conversation, do you have the ability to respond as to the grant and job creation that Mr. Alarcon asked about?
Yes, Mark Wolf with ITA. If I could first add to Jacob Wexler's comments in regards to the single audit finding. ITA has been working with General Services on the system issue, and back in December in 2008, there was a system upgrade made to the procurement system, the supply management system, and there were some issues relating to that, which now have been resolved. We're working with General Services and the Controller's Office to be able to document this information and to satisfy the conditions. So we believe that based on what we know now, that these issues can be resolved.
Okay. Do you have ITA respond?
Yes. In regards to the job creation issue, ITA completely understands the point that the councilman has made, Councilman Alarcon, in regards to the issue of job creation. One of the challenges that the library department, the Recreation and Parks, and CDD has had with the 188 public access computer stations is that the equipment that is being operated in these locations is between 5 and 8 years old and is highly inadequate. In addition, in those computer public access locations, some of those locations don't even have connection today to the internet. They're just standalone locations. So there are currently significant deficiencies in the capabilities that are offered to the public at these locations. And over the past 3 years, each of those departments in the annual budget process have asked for funding to replace this antiquated equipment, and due to the city's budget situation, they have been unable to get funding secured to replace the equipment. So as a result, the primary focus was on replacing really the equipment that the public uses because it's so inadequate. In regards to numbers, to address the question of outreach, there are millions of computer users that utilize the computers at these 188 public access facilities that are located throughout the city. Just in library alone, they have over 3.5 million users using the equipment on a daily basis, utilizing them primarily used for job research, resume prep, for children, for homework assistance, and so forth. So this has been one of the major issues that the departments have had in being able to have a sustainable public access facilities for the residents throughout Los Angeles. And the targeted locations for these sites are really looking at low-income, non-English speaking locations and areas that were part of the empowerment zones.
Did you get an answer to
I think
the question?
Yeah, I think what I understood to say is that we're going into facilities that are already highly populated and being used, and staff is already in place.
So I can assume that the reason my district got the fewest number of these is because we're doing so well with our technology?
Councilman, I think the problem I think the departments, as ITA worked with the 3 departments to locate facilities, there were 2 major requirements that those departments looked for in order to be able to support these. One is that they had existing computer labs that could house the computers, in other words, facilities that were existing facilities, and staffed by city staff that manage the training and technical support for the equipment. So I think based on those requirements, along with the issues of targeting the low-income areas as well as non-English speaking, I think that's how they arrived at the locations that were identified.
So Panorama City Library wouldn't qualify?
Actually, Panorama City Library should be included in the locations because all 72 libraries plus the main central library are
It's not
covered.
included.
Then that may be an oversight in our documentation, because all 72 libraries and the central branch are covered.
Library Penalty.
Oh, I see. It is listed. It's listed in a different council district.
Okay. Then apologize for that error. There's also some locations that you'll find on the list where you'll see what appears to be 2.
So let me understand you. The whole point of the digital divide is that areas that don't have technology need to get this technology. But so these areas don't have it. So you're telling me that you're putting it in places that already have it, as opposed to targeting areas that don't have as much.
I understand I hear your point, Councilman.
Does that mean you agree with it, or I don't understand what you hear it? I'm glad you hear it, but what does that mean?
I would say that The areas where we have these facilities are in areas that are underserved and unserved, and by the age of the equipment,
So you're saying that Mr. Koretz's district is more underserved than mine?
I did not say that, Councilman.
Well, what are you saying? Because my district has needs, and they're well-established, the highest poverty rate in the San Fernando Valley, and it gets the fewest of these in the entire city, including the valley. What's the rationale for that?
ITA worked with the three departments to locate.
Did you ever
these
talk to the
facilities.
council members? Did you ever talk to the council members?
There was briefing when this original item was brought before the committee to talk about actually submitting the grant.
Did you talk to the councilman of the 7th Council District?
We did not.
Maybe they know something about their districts? Other locations that might have been eligible? Now, to get back to the job creation question, is there anything in this grant that prohibited you from asking for more jobs?
Not that I'm aware.
So you could have applied for job creation as a subcomponent to the equipment issue?
It could have been a subcomponent, but because the city requirement of having a 20% match and also having an aging amount of computers that really were in desperate need of replacement, it took up the majority of the funding to be able to
So
support
if we
those
lay off the
facilities.
people that are assigned to these functions by this match, do we lose the grant? Or do we jeopardize our selection?
We would potentially.
Can we get an analysis of that? I see Mr. Clark motioning to the CAO, but we're in an interesting predicament here. We can't fault the application process for that, but if we were to recontemplate this grant, given what we know today, as opposed to what we knew yesterday, how would we apply for it differently? But I can't stress enough, I cannot stress enough, that the primary purpose of the stimulus money, number one on the list, was job creation. Every general manager needs to get it in their head that every application needs to focus on job creation as a possibility, I think to the maximum extent possible. And that's not what's going on here. We're buying equipment for libraries that aren't going to have staff pretty soon. That doesn't make sense. So I'm glad this request was there 4 years ago. We weren't in the situation we're in now. The focus is not equipment, it's on people. And yeah, I'll continue to pound on my friends until we get it right. Because I'm not here to make friends. I'm here to provide service. And we can't provide service when we have equipment that can be managed by people that aren't going to exist. I know you didn't know that at the time of the application, but in any case, do you read the news? President Obama wants to create jobs. I don't know who doesn't get that message. And yet you had an opportunity to insert some jobs. It could have been 50, but 2 would have been twice as many as what you applied for. And you didn't think of the humans consideration in terms of job creation. And that's, so I'm going to continue to take the time to convey this message each and every day. The council goes to council meetings every day. I'm going to raise this issue every single day. And in Jobs Committee, I'm going to bring the general managers in to make sure that they are focused on job creation, notwithstanding the fact that they were instructed to identify 1,000 layoffs yesterday. ERA is one of the only places we can turn to create jobs when we're talking about layoffs.
Let me just ask, in this grant, and if it were reconfigured, have you made an assessment of how much less equipment it would be if you had that enhanced job creation? Has that been, or was that ever considered?
We would need to go back and look at that. We have not done that.
Okay. Let me just ask you to do two things. Well, let me ask one thing. We talked when this came before the committee of whether there would be some ability to expand computers into some of the cities' city halls, the council city halls or decentralized city halls, in addition to the rec centers and workforce centers, because many of the council city halls also provide space for neighborhood councils and a few other things. Is that a possibility as you go through the list of locations?
Yes, it is. Actually, we anticipate that as we negotiate with vendors for procurement of the actual PCs, that we will likely be able to get a better pricing on the equipment, which could allow us to buy further, a larger number of devices and expand the locations to other locations in the city. And those locations could be looked at.
Would we be saying on this document that the locations that are identified is somewhat fluid?
I wouldn't characterize them as fluid because there was a lot of analysis in terms of the selection process made on the locations selected to meet certain requirements. And as a result of these locations, we received very favorable support from the federal government for this particular grant. For instance, there was a grand total of $50 million allocated for this particular category, and we received $7.5 million of it.
When I say fluid, you do have the ability to add a location or move a computer or two to other locations and not hamper the grant.
I think there's some modification that we can make in that.
Maybe not fluid, but it's flexible, or we could modify it.
Yes.
Okay. Let me just ask two things, and colleagues, if we can move this item, but I asked you to get with Mr. Alarcon about his district specifically and see if there are adjustments that he sees to be resolved. Also, I'd ask that you look at the council members that have constituent centers or decentralized city halls to look and see if those areas would also be appropriate places, because I think when we had the meeting before, I want our constituent center on Vermont, which is maybe 3 or 4 blocks away from the WorkSource Center, probably a lot further than that, maybe 10 blocks away, but because we have a lot of constituents that come in and we should have adequate space, so we'd like to see if that could be included in the list.
We'll do that.
The issue of how these were dispersed is an additional issue. And I know that there's a second round opportunity coming, but we have to go beyond the existing city resources because we have a long-standing history of providing fewer services, particularly library services, in certain parts of the city, but library services particularly in my district. And that's a citywide issue, not just the San Fernando Valley. So if one of your criteria is to locate these in pre-existing facilities where there's city staff, I'm out. I mean, that's it. That's not right. So we have to look at our extended contractors who have computer learning labs and you know, extend to those groups that receive grants from the City of Los Angeles who theoretically are part of the city family and they have staffs who are part of the city family. We have to extend the consideration to them if we're truly going to have impact on the digital divide. Otherwise, we're just contributing to the digital divide by providing, and I recognize some of the other poorer areas of the city get large amounts, but when I see, you know, Council District 12 getting a whole bunch and twice as many as me, you can't tell me that the digital divide problem is bigger in CD 12 than it is in CD 7. There's just no way. So I think you need to focus on the ball, which is digital divide. and address that concern, not this 4-year request for equipment that the department has had. The general managers need to get off this notion that we can do business as usual. We're in a time when we need to create jobs, not get the equipment that they wanted 4 years ago. That's just wrong. And I see far too many of these grants focusing on things other than job creation, and this is not the time for that.
So we'll move that item with those recommendations. Let me ask if Mr. Clark is still here. And we can ask, could you give us, I want to give you a letter I just received, it's such a long name. We're just notified through Senator Boxer's office regarding our grant called the Temporary Assistance for Needy Family Emergency Contingency Funds. And she goes on and discusses it by saying that these are our grants, that $5 billion of these funds were established for emergency contingency, specifically for employment and jobs. And she goes on to mention that California and 21 other states have accessed $94 million. In California, as of February, has created something like 15,000 jobs. But what's the concern is she said this money is going to end in September 2010, and because of the delay in California accessing it, we may not have gotten our fair share. So I'm going to give you this letter and see if we can get a report back at next week's meeting to see if we have the ability to get more of this money, and it hits right into what Mr. Alarcon is talking about on job creation.
Yes, sir.
I believe TANF money is primarily county. It's county money. It's welfare assistance.
That is correct.
Yeah,
that TANF money generally is, but there may be a component to it that we work with the county.
She says city and counties, and so I don't know.
Those cities that do welfare. We don't.
Yeah. So if you can give us a report back on that. So with moving that one item, with those recommendations, we'll adjourn the ad hoc committee. Yes.
There was a public comment. Did you want to take that from council chambers or not?
Yes, we can do that right now.
Council chambers.
Okay, we have one item. We can go downtown. Mr. Sachs is making a comment on item 2.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Good morning, Arnold Sachs. I'm kind of appalled to come in and listen to part of this conversation and to hear Councilman Alarcon saying that this problem that we have today didn't exist 4 years ago. Maybe not the core of this problem, but let me quote you from this item that was handed out October 17, 2005. These are attachment number 15 from the CAO's report. A potential shortfall of approximately $246.5 million exists for fiscal year 2006-2007. From March 13, 2006, a projected budget imbalance of $246.8 million for obligatory charges to the budget and $270.9 million when other potential expenditures are included. January 17, 2007, a potential shortfall of approximately $243 million for 2007-2008. It is important to note that this current estimate does not include cost of living increases for civilian employees beyond their current labor short contracts. These are CAO reports that come from the city. So to say that the problem with the budget didn't exist 4 years ago, and to say that we need jobs, well, if you had cut expenses, because, let's see, in 2009, I know that in the Transportation Committee, they considered removing certain venues as special event, getting special event fee waivers, including LA Live, Dodger Stadium, and the Coliseum. How much is spent on public safety services provided by the city that was not reimbursed from those venues in the 4 or 5 years prior to the Transportation Committee finally acting? And speaking of committees, why isn't the committee work being pushed forward?
Thank you very much for your comments, but you've gone over. We appreciate it. We're going to get ready to start council meeting at this time. This adjourns the ad hoc committee on economic recovery and reinvestment.